This is the Anthrobiology Podcast, hosted by me, Gabby LaPera. Every 2 weeks, I interview a biological anthropologist about what makes us, us. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Anthrobiology Podcast. Joining me via Zoom today, I have Dr. Robert Anemone from UNC Greensboro. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing very well, thanks. Looking forward to chatting with you today.
I am so happy to hear that. I actually wanted to brag a little bit, I guess, because you are the first person who has emailed me and been like, hey, I want to come on your show. And I would like you to attest to the fact that I responded very quickly and excitedly.
That is very true. Yeah.
And also, I'm super happy that someone's like, so excited to come on the show. Welcome.
One of my colleagues a while ago introduced me to the podcast, and we shared it with a couple of people in the department, sort of in the field. And and it didn't take too long for me to listen to a few and say, geez, I would like to be on this podcast. This would be fun.
Well, welcome. I'm very excited to have you here. So you are here because you are doing something that you call geospatial paleoanthropology.
Correct.
What is that?
Geospatial paleoanthropology is the sort of application of tools and techniques and databases from the geographic information sciences to the problems of a spatial nature that concern anthropologists. And if we think of data in a spatial sense, almost anything that anthropologists do, can be sort of looked at and analyzed from a spatial perspective. And it turns out that our colleagues in the geography departments who work on remote sensing and GIS kinds of things have all sorts of great approaches and tools to help us do our job better. So it's a great sort of collaborative, interdisciplinary approach that's worked well for us.
So I think that you sent me a very good review article to read, and there's like a few different threads that I want to pull on. One is this idea of remote sensing, which is a way to kind of understand the geology of wherever you might be digging. Can you explain how that works? And like why should, I guess even more fundamentally, why should someone care about what the geology looks like of where they're going to dig?
Well, actually, the geology is only one of the things that we can get from remote sensing, but it is an important thing. Remote sensing includes a variety of different approaches to basically studying the radiation that's arising from the Earth's surface and reflecting out into space. You can do it with low-lying aircrafts. You can do it with camera-borne aircraft. You can do it with drones or helicopters, and you can do it with satellite imagery. We've used a little bit of several of these approaches. But the Earth reflects radiation across the spectrum, from visible through near infrared, ultraviolet, all these things that go back to space. And we can only see the visible part of the spectrum with our eyes, but the satellites can pick up these other parts of the spectrum, and they can reveal really interesting things about the Earth's surface in any particular place. So, you mentioned geology. Yeah, the satellite imagery can distinguish between different rock units, different rock types, lithologies, grain size, presence or absence of minerals. It can tell us where sediments are covered by vegetation or roads or other civil aspects of civilization, and it can tell us where the rocks are exposed. And yeah, those are all really important clues for deciding where one wants to send his or her crew on a prospecting trip. When you're out in a basin like ours in Wyoming, the Great Divide Basin, that's about 10,000 square kilometers in area. So there's lots of different roads to explore. And if we can see them through satellite imagery or flying a drone to know if there's exposures, 2 miles up ahead, that can really help us determine or help us sort of productively and efficiently use our time when we're in the field, which obviously is limited. Our time, it's expensive to bring a crew out to the field, and you want to make the best use of it as possible.
Yeah, I think so. When I used to teach at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, we always had a unit where the Leakey's name came up just multiple times. And the students, like, I remember one semester, the student said to me, "So are these people just like incredibly lucky in a very weird way?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess that would be a great way to describe the Leakey's contributions to paleoanthropology, just being incredibly lucky in a very weird way." And it's true. Like, I mean, if you think of Ethiopia, it's a big place. The Awash Basin, it's a big place. And to find as many important finds as they've found, it's like they've made some kind of very, very odd deal with the devil. I don't know that I would have made that deal, but
Well, there's actually a good backstory about the work of Lewis and Mary Leakey at Olduvai Gorge,
Mhm.
because Olduvai Gorge itself was discovered apparently by a German lepidopterist who was following butterflies, and apparently he just almost wandered in and almost fell into this gorgeous, this crack in the earth, and that's the first Western sighting or notice of the presence of Olduvai Gorge. On the question of how lucky the Leakeys were in particular, at least, Lewis and Mary, the original, right, the parents of Richard and the parents-in-law of Meve Leakey, and they did work there for like 30 years before they found the first
That's
hominid
true.
skull. So there was lots of time spent there trudging up and down the cliffs of Olduvai Gorge. But the whole gorge itself was found by serendipity, and there's so many stories that people tell of getting up at night to answer nature's call and wandering to a place and finding something, and it's like there's a fossil there. It's just kind of legendary. There's stories of just falling, just getting really lucky and finding some a new site or
Oh
a
yeah.
particular fossil.
I believe there's even a story of someone accidentally falling into a cave full of fossils. And they're just like, "Oh, look at this cave full of
Yeah.
anthropological treasure."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I think that one of the most interesting aspects of the technology that you're talking about is the possibility of narrowing down where it might be, like, I don't want to say profitable because I don't mean it in the capitalist sense, but like it might be profitable. It might generate some of the actual remains that you're looking for,
Yeah.
as opposed to just being like, okay, I'm in Wyoming and I'm just going to look around.
Yeah. Well, the original way that people worked out west, I mean, and the work out west started like during the Civil War. And they would just sort of, go out in their wagons and cruise around in these badlands and just look for fossils. There wasn't a whole lot of thinking about it, before. There wasn't a lot of pre-planning. They were just going into pretty much unknown areas. We have a lot more information today. The geology of Wyoming, for example, is very well mapped. So we know just from, looking at maps, we know where the exposures of the particular fossils, the particular rock units that our fossils come from are. But even so, it's a huge area. If you just want to, search the Wasatch Formation, for example, in Wyoming, there's, thousands of places to go and thousands of square miles to prospect. So what our sort of predictive modeling approach allows is us to basically find the places that are most likely to be similar to places we've already found fossils, and then focus our prospecting, right? When we talk about just going out and searching for fossils, we talk about prospecting. We might work at a particular locality and maybe excavate there a little bit, but a lot of the work is looking for new localities through basically, 5 or 6 or 10 of us walking and prospecting this territory. And some of our papers suggest that, we've been able to reduce the amount of exposures by like, 70, 80% to identify the 20% or 30% of the exposures that are most likely to be very similar to ones that we know are productive. You can see how that could help in the day-to-day planning of a paleoanthropological field trip.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple things. One, for listeners, if you are studying a particular era in time, you want to get to a certain strata, and I think that you can do that with your remote sensing and GIS, correct?
Yeah.
So like that's definitely one thing. But then the other thing is that not all ancient environments were right to produce fossils. And that's why the geology becomes so important, because say for example, woolly mammoth wanders into a marshy bank and dies, that's actually a great environment to produce a fossil, sometimes even skin, which is cool, or hair in this case.
Mm-hmm.
I guess both. But not all environment. It's just like the same with human remains in forensic cases, which you've heard forensic anthropologists talk about. Not all environments preserve the bodies in the same way. And then if you take that even a step further, not all environments will actually fossilize things. What is a fossil, actually? Let's talk. I don't think I've ever defined fossil on this show. What is a fossil?
A fossil is a record of life in the past. The fossils that we find are not even organic anymore. So all the organic minerals in the bones that we find, and to date we haven't found any skin or any soft tissue, but the bones that we find are really the organic minerals that used to be there have been replaced with inorganic minerals. So they look just like the bone would have looked when it was organic, but there's been this sort of chemical replacement within the thing. So it's basically they're stone today, but they're evidence of life in the past. Even footprints are considered, fossils. There's, sort of trace fossils or things where you see, well, for example, like footprints at Laetoli or dinosaur tracks. Those are also considered, sort of fossils or trace fossils. But the ones that most, paleoanthropologists work on are like the ones I've described, where bone has been replaced, bone and teeth, of course, have been replaced by inorganic minerals and petrified, turned into stone.
Yeah.
Ours are like 55 million years old, a little younger and a little older than, around 55 million in Wyoming.
That's really cool. Wait, what is it like when you find something?
It's great. It's amazing, especially when you find something. When you find, in our world, finding jaws and teeth is like the thing you're really looking forward to. We find a lot of isolated teeth, a lot of isolated postcranial bones, and those are cool. They let you know, though. If I search even harder and stay in this area, maybe I'll find some nice jaws. But they don't get you as excited as finding a nice jaw with teeth. You can identify, a 5-tooth Homomaya jaw or a 4-tooth, Cantius jaw. It really gets us excited. I think it used to be that I would find one and I would be happy. And after a while, it turned into I find one, I get almost more anxious to find more. I think I've gotten greedy as as I've become more experienced, because there's always more fossils to be found. And when you find a really rich, a site that is quite rich, there's nothing like it. It's really an amazing feeling. And we actually had the good fortune to find an amazing locality that's one of the richest early Eocene localities in the American West. The day we found that was just astounding, and we were sort of on this high for days and days. And that actually ties in with the whole notion of serendipity and luck and chance in finding fossils.
Yeah, tell me.
Because we found the most amazing site that we found. I use site and locality kind of interchangeably, but the most amazing one that we did find in 2009, I think, we found by complete luck, by turning down a road to go to a place we knew, but it was actually a different road than the one we thought it was. And as we were driving there, we were heading in the right direction, and I could see where I wanted to go, but the road it died. It got just, there was no more road. And I got out of the vehicle and walked ahead, looked around to see if I could tell where the road continued. And it was very, very faint. And I saw the road ahead, but more interestingly, right next to the road, I saw this really nice set of sandstones that were very well exposed, sort of wind sculpted. And I said, "Oh, let's check out these sandstones. This looks tasty. This looks interesting." And there was probably 5 or 6 of us. We started crawling around the sandstone, the base of it, looking in the loose sand that sort of erodes out of it. And within an hour or so, my two of my graduate students, one whose name is immortalized in this locality, Tim Held from Seattle, we call it Tim's Confession. He found a couple of jaws, and we all got excited because the rest of us hadn't found anything at the part we were looking at. We went over to where he was, and before long, we had picked up several hundred jaws.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was by far the richest thing we have ever found. And I've talked to more experienced paleontologists in the West, people like Ken Rose from Johns Hopkins. And I said, "Ken, do you have any localities in the Bighorn Basin that give you like 500 jaws?" he said, well, yeah, some of them, that we've been working for 20 years, they continually produce, erosion occurs quickly and more jaws come out. We might get, 20 or 30 a year, but we probably got, several hundred, maybe 500. And I said, no, I'm talking about a locality that'll give you 500 jaws after like 4 or 5 days of working there. And he was astounded. He said, no, I don't think so. And that's what this Tim's Confession site was like. So that was just the most exciting day, any of us has ever had in field paleontology. It was a very, very memorable day.
That sounds awesome. I just want to pause for a second and say, hey, listeners, for people who aren't more immersed in anthropology, paleontologists, they look for dinos. If they find a human, that's cool too. But probably not going to find humans 50 million years ago in Wyoming. Just in case.
Lots of fossil curious. Primates, though.
Yeah, exactly. But we're not necessarily talking about like 400 human or early human ancestor jaws. We're talking about not that. Dinosaurs, primates, whatever you're looking for there.
Yeah.
Just so you know. But I don't know. This is one of those things where it's really cool because you're doing stuff that can so easily be cross-applied to paleoanthropology. It's you start with the same word. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of a lot of these disciplines is that you do get to interact and do so many different things for so many different people.
Yeah. It's interesting in working on this stuff. I've sort of looked at the history of people using geospatial approaches in anthropology, writ large. And the archaeologists have been much quicker to use these tools from GI science, from geographic information sciences. And paleo people have been, less quick to get onto it. But we published this stuff over the last 10 years, and I've noticed a real uptick in the number of other research groups that are using geospatial approaches, using remote sensing, creating sort of different predictive models than the ones that we've used, and applying them all over the world. I mean, one paper that came out in 2018 uses GIS and sort of a complex kind of analytical approach to predict where to find dinosaurs in South Africa. And a lot of these approaches are building on, the previous steps. And I think a lot of us are realizing that, in the future, geographic information science approaches will really be more and more important to field anthropologists of all types. And it's something that we should be training our students in now. We should be encouraging our students to take GIS, to take remote sensing, satellite imagery interpretation, and if not, to collaborate with professional people in those fields. I don't know how to do all of the remote sensing stuff, but I'm lucky enough to have a great colleague at Western Michigan University, Dr. Jay Emerson in the Department of Geography there, who's my remote sensing guy. So he and I have published a lot of this stuff together, and he provides that technical, here's how to get the satellite imagery and how to do, the neural network model on it. And I provide the sort of professional on the site sort of, understanding of fossils and understanding of the geology in Wyoming. And it's a really great, collaboration with two people with different skill sets coming together. And we've been able to publish this stuff both in my journals, anthropology journals, Evolutionary Anthro, JHE, and he's been able to publish this stuff in geography journals, remote sensing letters, for example, things of that sort. So it seems to be it's of interest to people in both fields to see the application of these technologies or the application of the technologies to interesting problems that maybe geographers haven't thought about in the past, how to find fossils.
Yeah, so just, keep your heart and mind open when you go to grad school or anywhere else. And like, you'll never know who you'll run into that like you can get like a really fruitful partnership out of. And also like for students who are thinking about doing this, like you should totally do it. It's just one more tool in your toolbox that, can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that besides just like actually understanding how these technologies work and then like maybe applying them, I think the other thing that's like really cool about what you do, this is how you know that I am potentially not very cool, is that databases are so neat. Databases are really cool. And the thing is that if you understand how databases work and like you can talk to databases, especially relational databases, that is a huge skill that's useful across a variety of disciplines. And even if you don't end up in anthropology, very useful in like the business world. as someone who is currently fighting with a relational database system today.
That's so interesting. I can suggest someone you should talk to in our field about exactly this. This is his name is Dene Reed, Dr. Dene Reed at the University of Texas Department of Anthropology at Austin, and he's developed a big relational database for fossil collections. Basically, it's called Paleocore, paleocore.org, and it's brilliant because he's really interested in the geospatial approaches. So you can bring in basically your fossil catalog. So if you go there and look at it, you'll see the Great Divide Basin fossil catalog is there, as well as several from East Africa and Europe, I think, too. Dene mostly works in Ethiopia, so he works with some of the big paleoanthropology sites there. And people basically port their fossil catalog into this system. And he's all about the standards for geographic information, and you can put photos of your specimens, all sorts of stuff. It's just a brilliant thing, and that Dene has really pulled up from the ground up and pioneered. And he would be a great interview. He's a really cool guy and has done brilliant work. And I love having my stuff on Paleocore.
Well, I will definitely consider that. And it sounds like it's open access. So listeners, you should totally check it out and see what's in there and see what I'm talking about when I'm talking about relational databases.
That's actually, he is very committed to open access. He uses all open access software to put this together. And he's got a list that I'm sure you'll be familiar with, but it's pretty intense.
Open access is the way of the future for everyone out there listening to this.
That's the topic of your conversation with Dene, open access and anthropology.
But yeah, I think that if you can figure out how to use databases and you can get really comfortable with them, that's also a super, super important skill, especially as we move kind of into the future and away from just I was, just walking around this Wyoming basin and I found something that's. It's exciting. Also, side note, what is Wyoming like?
Wyoming is wild and wonderful. Or I think that's
West Virginia.
That's what they use for West Virginia. Yes, but Wyoming is even wilder and a lot fewer people. Yeah, the place that I work is called the Great Divide Basin, and it's not one of the better known sedimentary basins that are full of Eocene fossils. In Wyoming, there's the Bighorn Basin, the Wind River Basin, the Bridger Basin, that are all better known and have been worked for 150 years by lots of teams and a lot more fossils. But the Great Divide Basin was worked in the 1950s by a Smithsonian paleontologist named C.L. Gazen. And he found 3 or 4 kind of mediocre localities with Eocene mammals. And he said, yeah, there's some Eocene mammals out here, and never did all that much with it. And no one had really worked there then up until the 90s. So when I was beginning, I did my dissertation on living strepsirrhine primates or prosimian primates, functional morphology kind of stuff. But I knew I always wanted to work in Eocene paleontology in the West. So I started working with a colleague from the University of Colorado, Bert Covert. And he worked in a basin called the Washakie Basin, which is just south of the Great Divide. And after a few seasons there, I was like, so I'm thinking of starting my own project in Wyoming. You got any ideas on good basins? And he said, yeah, the Great Divide Basin. You already know the area around here. It's just, stone's throw from the Washakie. And no one has worked there for decades. So we decided to give it a shot. And the first thing we did is try to relocate the old localities from the 50s and early 60s. And we sort of succeeded and found some fossils. And gradually we just prospected more and more and more. And now we have over, about 200 localities from this basin with about 15,000 mammalian specimens. The problem with the Great Divide Basin compared to the Bighorn and all is it doesn't have the amazing badlands that you'll see up in northern, Wyoming in the Bighorn, for example. So there are fewer exposures. So there are sort of limited badland exposures here and there. And the stuff in between is quaternary, recent sort of alluvium. There's sand dunes, there's sagebrush. So you got to, you don't have one place where it's just amazing badlands for miles and miles.
When you talk about badlands, what does that mean?
Those erosional sort of cliffs where the sediment is eroding, and sometimes for miles and miles, all you see is exposed sediment from the Eocene and the Paleocene. In our place, those things exist, but in small packets here and there, separated by sort of covered exposure. I mean, the Great Divide Basin is kind of a high plateau. It ranges from 6,000 to 8 or 9,000 feet in some of the peaks. So it doesn't have this amazing sort of relief. The whole thing is lifted up high. It's almost like a high plane.
Mm-hmm.
So there are more people in one. There are more pronghorn antelope in Wyoming than there are people. And our basin basically doesn't even have any towns. There's a couple of abandoned ranches, one or two active ranches. So we see essentially no people when we're out there. Every once in a while, an oil worker will drive through the two track, and we'll see them. So we have it all to ourselves. There's amazing wildlife. There's badgers, mountain lions, golden eagles, pronghorn antelope.
Do you camp out there?
Oh yeah. So we camp about 50 miles from town. The weather can be wild, and get some amazing, hellacious storms. Our camp was completely destroyed by a flash flood a couple of years ago while we were in town. And we got back to camp at like 9:00 at night, and there was like 6 inches of mud in our tents, and tents had been blown down. It was kind of a crazy disaster. But that's the kind of thing that can happen in Wyoming. After a rain, the roads turn into this really slick gumbo, they call it sometimes. And it cakes your tires immediately. So we're slipping and sliding off the roads and pulling people out of the muck. So there's never a dull moment, but it's amazing. We love it. We've become really close with the people who run this sort of a rest area and a gas station and a cafe and a bar in a place called Point of Rocks, Wyoming. And I'm going to give a shout out to the Varley family of Point of Rocks, Wyoming. They've helped us out of so many tough places over the years. They're an amazing Wyoming family. They've been there for generations. They've run this general store and this gas station for generations, and they're the most wonderful people that a paleontologist could ever hope to get to know in the field.
Yeah.
And I hope they listen to this podcast. I'll be sure to send them the link.
I think that's one of the really cool things about doing field work is that you get to meet really wonderful people no matter where you are in the world. And it's funny because like you think of like doing field work in the States and maybe you don't necessarily think of like, I don't know, I had a Herman Poncer on a few weeks ago, and he was talking about like finding 6-foot-long snakes in your hut, or I was talking to someone else who was talking about like, oh yeah, like you got to watch out for parasites, Dr. Sipon Robbins. And it's like sure, 6-foot snakes maybe, but like you potentially don't have to worry about as much as that stuff here, but like it still has all of its own challenges, especially just being out in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Having grown up on the East Coast, a lot of my experience of nature has been, I don't know, I feel like a little bit more gentle. And having been living in California, I can see how things can just go wrong so quickly, like with wildfires or just sudden storms, and it just feels totally different.
What about earthquakes?
Earthquakes. Ugh. I try really hard not to think about earthquakes. I'm actually really, really, really scared of earthquakes. There have been 4 since I've been out here that I could feel. The best part is that whenever they happen in the middle of the night, which is always, they never happen at like noon when you're like, oh, that was an earthquake. They always happen in the middle of the night, and I wake up in a panic and I'm like, this is just it's a pre-shock, which is not really a thing. It's going to be a very big earthquake in a minute. And the worst thing is that my dog also wakes up, and then she like barks at me like it's my fault that I made the earthquake. And I'm like, no. Also, aren't you supposed to warn me? What about animals warning their owners about earthquakes? Right. Nothing. She's useless. But yeah, it's just something that you don't really think about, is how intense nature can be, even here.
The other cool thing about fieldwork is, you end up forming really strong relationships with colleagues and students. And, some of the people I've done fieldwork with over the years have become, my closest friends in the field of anthropology. So you do really form bonds, and every once in a while you get the opportunity to meet really amazing people who, almost always end up being super helpful. People who really know the local area, far better than you, who are just really willing to help, and they're interested in the science. We end up, bringing fossils to the cafe/bar in the evening, and the locals, who work in a coal mine there, sometimes they run across fossils. They'll bring things in and show us, and we'll show them the things that we're finding. Yeah, it's really it really is one of the most rewarding things of doing field work in long-term field work in one area. I've worked there about 25 field seasons, so it's been great.
I'm just imagining this really rural town in Wyoming that just knows a ton about Eocene mammals now.
That's right.
Just
That's
like
right. They call us the bone diggers. They always look forward to seeing the bone diggers back out in the summer.
like you stop one of them on the street and you're like, hey, what do you think about strepsirrhines? And they're like, let me tell you.
They'll tell you places that that you should go out and find fossils. A lot of them, they spend a lot of time rock hounding, looking for minerals and stuff, and they'll say, oh yeah, if you go out north of this place, you'll find some bones.
Yeah. So one thing I do want to bring up for maybe younger listeners who are thinking about doing field work is it sounds like you have a really wonderful and healthy and supportive field environment, but not all field environments are like that, unfortunately. So like that's just something to be aware of. Just try and do your research, try and talk to other graduate students that have gone before or other students that have gone before to like get a pulse on what that field season is going to be like for you before you commit to going out there.
Yeah.
An unfortunate reality.
Yeah. We have a real network of people who've worked with us over the years. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, if someone were thinking of working with me, there would be lots of people they could talk to. That's probably true of most long-term sites where, people who worked with us as undergrads, as graduate students, and are now professors,
Yeah, certainly. It's always really nice to hear of like really wonderful, supportive fieldwork environments because, like there's also horror stories. So it's just nice to hear about a place where it seems like everything's going right, honestly.
Yeah.
So one other thing I wanted to touch on before we kind of move to the final part of the interview is that you have also been using, or not maybe you necessarily personally, but you can also use GIS. Sorry, I have kind of a rear window situation going on. And there is a naked man.
Oh my God. The joys of living in San Francisco.
Oh gosh. Oh, he just closed his curtains. That was probably wise there.
If this podcast is gonna succeed, it is wise that he did it.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy the things that I have seen back here. I've also seen a rat literally the size of my head on the roof in front of me. I saw a hawk kill a pigeon and just like decapitate it and just like sit there and munch on it. And this all always happens during podcasts, like while I'm recording. Nothing ever happens the rest of the time. Maybe it's just because I'm like facing out more, like without looking at a screen, but it's just wild.
Do you live right in the city?
I live in the Tenderloin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a neighborhood with a lot of character is how I would describe it. Some days it's really good and some days it's really bad. But every day it's in San Francisco and that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
No, so the thing that I wanted to ask you about before I got distracted by genitalia is functional morphology and GIS, because that was one of the things that you said could also be done with it. Can you explain how that works a little bit more?
Yeah, I sort of I cover that in the yearbook of physical anthropology article where I talk about different uses of GIS. So probably the best example of how GIS has been used in functional morphology in our field is the work of people like Peter Unger at the University of Arkansas on dental morphology. I mean, basically, what Peter sort of started doing long before people were creating, occlusal models of teeth with CT scanners, which is kind of the way you do it now, which is, I guess, the development of what Peter started, is basically he used GIS tools to sort of digitize tooth surfaces and create what we call a DEM, a digital elevation model, which is the same thing we do out in the wild. We'll fly a drone above a locality and create a digital elevation model of that locality, a 3D model with X, Y, Z coordinates on everything. And Peter basically used that kind of approach originally from the world of GIS to analyzing the shape of teeth. What he really helped solve, which is kind of the coolest use of this, is he came up with a method that was not dependent on landmarks, because landmarks wear as teeth wear. But with the assumption that the shape of a tooth, whether unworn or worn, is adaptive to the diet of the animal. He sort of looks at the shape and how it changes with wear and analyzes that. Whereas, if you want to measure landmarks on teeth, you basically have to throw out all the worn teeth, and you can only use the really fresh teeth, which really limits your sample. So he solved what I think he called the worn tooth conundrum by using this sort of landscape approach, looking at the cusps and valleys on a tooth in the same way that we today use a drone, say, or LiDAR to look at hills and valleys in a fossil fossil terrain, a locality or multiple localities.
Yeah, it's a micro application of a tool that was originally intended for macro purposes, and it's really exciting, just kind of the flexible thinking that you get.
Yeah, you think about wanting to measure, say, areas or angles on teeth, and using calipers on teeth, that's all pretty impossible. But if you create a 3D digital elevation model, all of a sudden you can have all sorts of analytical approaches that are way more complex than measuring linear distances, which is what we did 30, 40 years ago. Pretty much all we did, maybe a little earlier than that. So yeah, it is a really cool sort of micro application of the technology.
Yeah, I don't know. I love seeing what scientists come up with when they're presented with an interesting problem. I feel like that's where you get just some of the most like elegantly made experiments and some of the most creatively used existing tools applied to another purpose. Is there anything else you want to say about GIS or radar sensing or anthropology or paleontology?
Well, I guess the one thing I would end on is the this notion that in where we should be moving in terms of the kind of field work and planning for the field work that we do in paleoanthropology, moving to utilize more predictive models of where to find things. And people are doing amazing work. I'm working with a student from Oxford, Portuguese student named João Coelho. And João is a brilliant, young field worker. I worked with him in Mozambique, where he's developing his own sort of analytical machine learning or sort of approaches to developing predictive models for finding fossil sites in this wonderful national park in Mozambique where we've worked, called Gorongosa. So he's trying to, and the problem he's dealing with is in Gorongosa there's a lot of forest and woodlands, and the exposures are very limited. So he's using satellite imagery and developing approaches to really pick out places where there's a good likelihood of finding fossils there. And he's basically built on the stuff that we've done in Wyoming and really taken it, well beyond what we've done. So yeah, predictive modeling, I think, will improve the way we sort of plan our fieldwork and will increase the success of our fieldwork. And
yeah. No, yeah. That's exciting.
I just sort of ended there. So
no, it's good. That's really exciting stuff. I'm really excited to see how this goes forward in the future, and I'm excited to follow your career, which is funny because I feel like that's normally something you say to someone who's just graduated, not someone who's like mid-career, but I'm excited to follow your career, sir.
Yeah, there's going to be a couple papers coming out on the work in Mozambique pretty soon, so maybe you'll be excited. He does great work.
Yeah, I will totally check that out. In the interest of time, it's time for your final 3 questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Since you've listened before, you know what's coming. If someone would like to learn more about the kind of work you do, where is a good place for them to start?
I think the Scientific American article is probably the most accessible one to show sort of the approach, the problem that we're trying to, the way we're trying to get beyond just luck and chance and serendipity and create, predictive models for how to find fossils. I think that's a great place to start. The Evolutionary Anthropology article is a good one that goes into quite a bit of detail on the neural network approach that we've used, which is, I think, good. And I also, I ran a seminar at the School for Anthropological Research, SAR, in Santa Fe a couple of years ago. And we edited a book called New Geospatial Approaches to the Anthropological Sciences in 2018 from the University of New Mexico Press. And that book shows how primatologists, New World archaeologists, Old World archaeologists, paleontologists like myself and some others how we all have used different tools, techniques, and approaches from the geographic information sciences and applied them to anthropological research. And that'll give you a sense of the breadth of the kinds of applications people have been using in anthropology.
Yeah, certainly. I'll try to include all of those on the website, but just in case someone's so excited that they can't wait and they want to Google it, the Scientific American article is called "Computer Models Improve Odds of Fossil Hunting Success."
No, actually, it's called Fossil GPS.
Fossil GPS?
Yeah, I think what you're doing is looking at maybe a comment or something, a news piece about it.
Oh, yep, I found it.
Or that's maybe the subtitle or something. Yeah, it's Fossil GPS. What month and year? You probably can see it on the article right there.
Sorry, the one I was looking at was from 2014 originally. You've
got my CV though. It'll have all the citations you can.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So I will make sure that this section is cleaned up so that it sounds good.
Use all your powers, all your editing powers to clean it up.
They are strong. Second question, what are you reading for work right now?
I'm reading a wonderful book by someone that people may have seen on TV because he's one of the main talking heads about COVID-19, Dr. Peter Hotez from, I think, the University of Houston infectious disease doctor. And he's written a wonderful book called Preventing the Next Pandemic. So I'm teaching a seminar in the fall about pandemics. And this is a very recent, there's a lot of cool books on the topic, but this is a really recent and very good one. So Preventing the Next Pandemic. And I'm reading a bunch of stuff on skulls because I'm working on this amazing skull that we found at that really cool locality. We've CT scanned, and I'm working with a bunch of colleagues on that. So I'm reading everything I can about the anatomy and developmental biology of the mammalian skull to go along with that.
That sounds like fun. Okay. And then what are you consuming for fun right now?
I've been really getting into Elmore Leonard, sort of crime novels set in Detroit, which is really fun. I used to live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, when I taught at Western Michigan. So Elmore Leonard's thrillers. And also, I've been reading a wonderful biography of an amazing Victorian woman named Gertrude Bell. It's called Queen of the Desert. She was an associate of Lawrence of Arabia. She was there at the founding of the nation state of Iraq, sort of in the post-World War I era. She was a mountain climber. She climbed all these peaks in Switzerland. She was an incredibly accomplished sort of upper-class English aristocrat who had the most interesting life. Queen of the Desert by Janet Wallach.
That sounds wonderful. I will definitely check that out. I'm about to go on a very long camping trip, so I'm going to bring a book with me because I will not have any service. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was so lovely to meet you. You're welcome back whenever you'd like.
It was really fun for me too. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Anthrobiology Podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me at gabby.lapera@anthrobiology.com. That's spelled GABY.LAPERA@anthrobiology.com. This show is produced by me. Music courtesy of Chad Crouch, aka Poddington Bear at Sound of Picture.